your protest and demonstration is anchored on hate for others. We must be honest, we must be candid with ourselves as a nation, because what is going on in these streets, people think it is fashionable. Because there, take selfies, post on social media. I don't know whether that is the direction we want to go. Solutions are found in strategy and a plan. And if it is Ruto must go, tell me how you want me to go. What? You know? Let's be honest with ourselves. What do you mean? What do you mean by Ruto must go?
Just a few days ago, at a protest against police brutality, 2 officers shot a 22-year-old man in the head at point-blank range.
William Ruto has just delivered the most tone-deaf speech that I've seen from an African president in recent times. All of this 4 days after there's a reported 16 people killed in a street protest in the capital city. In my opinion, the speech that he put out has several flaws, and he asked several questions. So I'm here to highlight those points and give the responses that I think echo the sentiment of many people across the African continent when it comes to leaders not doing what they're supposed to do. For those of you that don't know, my name is TJ. I am Nigerian and British mixed. And on this channel, we talk about African geopolitics. At the moment, Kenya is going through an extremely difficult time. The streets are burning. People are frustrating, anger is boiling over, and terrible things are happening as a result. Now, I'm not one of these people that is pro-anarchy. I think there should be rule of law, there should be balance. But when you see people protesting in the streets multiple times in the course of a year, when you see civil unrest, this is a symptom of something. Right now, William Ruto is putting a lot of blame on the rioters for all of this trouble. And this is a pattern we see all over Africa. William Ruto is very well spoken. He's very articulate. He's calculated. He sounds like the kind of guy you can trust. But we have to take our leaders to task. We have to highlight any hypocrisies and call out their actions, because we all know that words are empty. Let's get into the information. President William Ruto stood before business leaders at the Kenyatta International Convention Center on June 27, 2025. Just 1 day earlier, his security forces had killed at least 16 protesters in the streets of Kenya. Blood was still fresh on the pavement. While Kenyans were burying teenagers shot by police, Ruto was giving speeches about entrepreneurship. While mothers were identifying their children's bodies in morgues, he was discussing market opportunities. The sheer disconnect between reality and his rhetoric shows a leader completely detached from the suffering of his people. This is the same man who asked protesters a simple question. If you want Ruto to go, tell me how you want me to go. Today, I'm going to give him the answers he's looking for. But first, let's understand what really happened and why his response shows he's completely out of touch with reality. The June 25th protests weren't random violence. They started because a schoolteacher named Albert Ojwang was beaten to death in police custody. His crime? Criticizing Deputy Inspector General Eliud Lagat on social media. Albert was dragged over 200 miles from his home in Homa Bay County to Nairobi in the middle of the night. 2 days later, he was dead. Police claimed he killed himself by banging his head against a cell wall repeatedly. An autopsy proved he was tortured to death with head injuries, neck compression, and soft tissue damage consistent with brutal assault. But Albert's death wasn't isolated. In the 4 months before he died, 20 other people had died in police custody. That's one person every 6 days dying in Kenyan police stations. This isn't law enforcement. This is systematic execution of anyone who dares question authority. When people took to the streets demanding justice for Albert, they met live ammunition. Boniface Kariuki, a 24-year-old street vendor selling masks, was shot point blank in the head. He wasn't even protesting. He was simply trying to make a living when two officers with riot gear approached him, punched him, then shot him without provocation. A British YouTuber named Dylan Page traveled all the way to Kenya to document this killing. He had to leave the country immediately after filming for his own safety.
I am here in Nairobi, Kenya, and everyone needs to know what happened right here on Tuesday. To the average person walking past, that might look like some random orange dirt, but it's not. It's covering blood. And it's also the reason I posted this video only after I left the country. You see, just a few days ago at a protest against police brutality, two officers shot a 22-year-old man in the head at point blank range. Crazy part is that young man named Boniface Kariuki wasn't even protesting. He was simply a street vendor selling masks when two officers with riot gear and shotguns approached him, punched him, and then completely unprovoked.
Think about that significance. A foreign British YouTuber with 800,000 subscribers felt such deep human concern that he traveled all the way to Kenya to document this tragedy and bring it to an international stage. Dylan Page represents the modern spread of information, where individuals with platforms can shine a light on stories that might otherwise go unnoticed. His decision to come to Kenya underscores the gravity of the moment and the growing global solidarity with African struggles for justice and accountability. This is the backdrop when Ruto asked his question, "Where should I go?"
And if it is Ruto must go, tell me how you want me to go. How, what? You know? I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. What do you mean? What do you mean by Ruto must go? How do I go?
Let me give him specific answers. First, he should go on his knees to the families of Albert Ojwang and Boniface Kariuki. He should crawl to every mother who lost a child to police bullets. He should explain why Albert died for criticizing police corruption. He should explain why Boniface was executed while selling masks to feed his family. He should explain why at least 60 protesters were killed in 2024 and 16 more in June 2025. Second, he should go to the Hague International Criminal Court. When a government systematically kills its own people for protesting, that's a crime against humanity. Over 70 protesters have died under his direct command. That's not law and order. That's state terrorism that demands international prosecution. Third, he should go face every family destroyed by his policies, not just the families of the dead, but the families crushed by economic policies that serve foreign creditors instead of Kenyan citizens. He should explain why Kenya spends more money paying foreign debt than on healthcare, education, and infrastructure combined. But Ruto has a different answer. He says, we have a constitution in place.
Because we have a constitution in place, dear people. Right? Yes.
He's right about that. The constitution does exist. It also guarantees the right to life in Article 26. His police have violated that right over 70 times in 2 years. It guarantees peaceful assembly in Article 37. His response has been live bullets, tear gas, and water cannons. It prohibits torture in Article 25. Albert Ojwang died from torture in a police cell. The Constitution also provides for presidential impeachment under Article 145. If Ruto truly respects constitutional governance, he should respect this provision too. The same constitution he hides behind when asked to leave office also provides legal mechanisms for his removal when he violates his oath of office.
If you want Ruto to go, please, my simple advice to you, look for a better plan. Convince the people of Kenya that you have a better plan.
Ruto wants protesters to bring him a better plan. This is perhaps the most insulting thing he said. Solutions are literally his job. That's why people elected him president, not protester-in-chief. What was his plan to prevent Albert Ojwang's death? What was his plan to avoid using live ammunition on protesters? What was his plan to address the economic crisis without killing people who complained about it? What was his plan to keep his campaign promises instead of serving International Monetary Fund interests?
This one of mine has created 250,000 jobs in the housing sector. Look for one that creates 500,000. This one of mine, I have brought down the cost of hunger from 240 to 160. Look for one that brings it to 50.
He brags about creating 250,000 jobs in the housing sector. Meanwhile, 73% of Kenyans are in severe financial distress. 9 out of 10 Kenyans earn the same or less than they did before the pandemic. His job creation claims ring hollow when most Kenyans can't afford basic necessities. He claims he brought the price of maize flour down from 240 to 160 shillings. But food prices have soared across the board under his leadership. Sugar prices jumped 32%, vegetables increased 50%, maize flour doubled in many areas. For families already struggling, these increases represent the difference between eating and going hungry. Here's the bigger deception Ruto doesn't want you to see. In July 2024, after deadly protests forced him to withdraw the finance bill that would have imposed crushing new taxes, he publicly promised to avoid taking on more debt. The promise lasted exactly 2 months. By December 2024, Ruto had borrowed 1.4 trillion shillings since taking office. In March 2025, Kenya applied for a new IMF lending program despite his previous year's promise to avoid such arrangements. This is a clear pattern of deception. Massive protests against debt-driven austerity are met with promises to change course, but once public attention moves elsewhere, the borrowing resumes with even greater intensity. While Ruto was giving his speech, his Interior Minister, Kipchumba Murkomen, was making an even more dangerous statement.
Na tumeambia polisi, mtu yoyote mwenye atakaribia police station, piga yeye risasi.
This translates to, we've told police anyone who approaches a police station, shoot them with bullets. This isn't law enforcement guidance. This is a direct shoot-to-kill order that could turn every police station into an execution site. The Law Society of Kenya immediately condemned Murkomen's directive as illegal and unconstitutional. LSK President Faith Odhiambo stated firmly that the Cabinet Secretary has no authority under law to issue such orders. Even former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua called the remarks irresponsible and dangerous, revealing he had opposed Murkomen's appointment to the interior position. But the damage was done. Government officials were now openly ordering extrajudicial executions on live television. When senior leaders give shoot-to-kill orders publicly, it signals to lower-level officers that murder will be protected from the highest levels of government. June 25th wasn't just about Albert Ojwang's death. It was about a pattern of state violence that has made Kenya unlivable for ordinary people. The protests marked the first anniversary of the 2024 finance bill demonstrations that killed over 60 people. Activists and families of victims called for peaceful demonstrations, but they were met with the same brutal response that created the crisis in the first place. Police blocked major roads leading into Nairobi's central business district. Government buildings were barricaded with razor wire. The Communications Authority of Kenya ordered a halt to all live television and radio coverage of the demonstrations. Free-to-air signals for KTN and NTV were disabled. Internet services slowed dramatically. The Telegram app was restricted. When governments block media coverage of their own actions, they're admitting guilt. Western embassies condemned the use of hired goons to disrupt peaceful demonstrations. The United States, United Kingdom, Germany, and Canada issued a joint statement expressing concern over plainclothes officers in unmarked vehicles and the deployment of gangs to sabotage protests. International observers recognized what Kenyan officials denied. The government was orchestrating violence, then blaming protesters for it. The economic crisis driving these protests isn't accidental. It's the direct result of Ruto's subservience to Western financial institutions. Kenya now owes $3.5 billion to the IMF alone, with total debt reaching $82 billion, representing 68% of GDP. The country spends more money servicing this debt than on all other budget items combined. Ruto implemented IMF-mandated austerity measures immediately after taking office. He scrapped fuel subsidies that had kept transport costs manageable, causing fuel prices to skyrocket beyond 200 Kenyan shillings per litre. He removed maize flour subsidies that helped families afford basic food. He doubled the value-added tax on fuel from 8% to 16%, that adding another burden on struggling consumers. He imposed a new housing levy, forcing workers to contribute money they could barely afford to a program they never requested. The 2024 Finance Bill represented the culmination of this assault on ordinary Kenyans. Designed to generate $2.7 billion to meet IMF targets, the bill would have imposed crushing new taxes on basic goods and services. The legislation was so punitive it sparked the largest protests Kenya had seen in years, ultimately forcing Ruto to withdraw it after dozens of people were killed. But Ruto's subservience to Western interests goes beyond economic policy. He lifted Kenya's 10-year ban on genetically modified organisms just months after taking office, following intense pressure from multinational corporations and the US government. Bill Gates visited Kenya immediately after the ban was lifted, promoting GM crops at the University of Nairobi. The timing wasn't coincidental. The lifting of the GMO ban came with policies that criminalize traditional farming practices that have sustained Kenyan communities for generations. Farmers are now prohibited from saving and sharing indigenous seeds, practices that formed the backbone of agricultural resilience for centuries. Instead, farmers are forced into debt cycles with companies like 1 Acre Fund, which provides GM seeds on credit along with mobile phones and televisions, trapping farmers in financial obligations they cannot escape. These seeds must be purchased every season, unlike traditional varieties that farmers could save and replant. The environmental and health costs are already becoming apparent. Cancer deaths in Africa have increased 45% since 2000, coinciding with increased pesticide use. In Kenya, 267 pesticides banned in Europe and America are still legal for use. Farmers now use toothbrushes for pollination after pesticides killed local pollinators. Ruto's foreign policy represents systematic abandonment of Kenya's traditional non-aligned stance. Most egregiously, Kenya is leading a US-backed multinational security mission to Haiti with over 1,000 Kenyan police forces. The United States pledged $300 million in funding while refusing to send its own troops, preferring to use Kenyan forces as expendable proxies. This marks the first time an African nation has deployed forces for a security mission in the Western Hemisphere. Kenya's High Court ruled the deployment unconstitutional, noting the lack of reciprocal agreements required by law. Opposition lawmakers filed multiple lawsuits challenging the mission. This quid pro quo arrangement reveals the true nature of Kenya's foreign policy under Ruto: economic pain and constitutional violations at home in exchange for serving as America's African proxy abroad. Compare Ruto's leadership to what's happening in Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traoré. Traoré, labeled a dictator by Western media, has delivered remarkable results since taking power in September 2022, the same month as Ruto's presidency. Burkina Faso's GDP grew from $18.8 billion to $22.1 billion, representing 17.5% growth in just 2 years. When a military leader delivers better results for his people than an elected president, it raises fundamental questions about what democracy actually means in practice. When protesters say they love Kenya but hate the leaders, Ruto calls this contradictory. He's wrong. Loving your country means removing leaders who destroy it. Every freedom struggle in history required removing oppressive leaders. That's not hate, that's patriotism. True patriots stand against tyranny, not enable it. Ruto accuses protesters of burning the country, but evidence shows state-sponsored gangs did most of the looting and burning. Dylan Page's footage reveals organized chaos, not organic protests. Ruto says violence isn't the solution, while his ministers order police to shoot protesters. Peaceful protesters met with live ammunition could understandably become desperate in their responses to systematic oppression. The international attention this story is getting shows how serious the situation has become. Dylan Page's courage exposes the cowardice of corporate media. This kind of independent journalism matters because it bypasses traditional gatekeepers who might soften or ignore stories that embarrass powerful governments. When a white British voice legitimizes African struggles to global audiences, it amplifies voices that might otherwise be dismissed or ignored by international media focused on Western interests. Real solutions exist, but they require courage Ruto doesn't have. Immediate actions should include prosecuting officers who killed Albert Ojwang and Boniface Kariuki, compensating families of all those killed by state forces, cancelling IMF programs causing economic suffering, and ending proxy wars and foreign military bases that serve American interests instead of Kenyan security needs. Long-term structural changes could include following Burkina Faso's model of resource sovereignty, banning GMOs and supporting indigenous agriculture that doesn't trap farmers in debt cycles, ending police-state tactics against civilians exercising constitutional rights, and actually respecting constitutional governance and human rights instead of just paying lip service to democratic principles. Ruto claims June 25th wasn't successful because people died and businesses were destroyed. He's defining success wrong. The real success was exposing his regime's true nature to the world. International condemnation followed from multiple Western governments. Unity was achieved across tribal lines he and other politicians have tried to exploit for decades. Young Kenyans saw through his deception completely and won't be fooled again by empty promises. The actual failures were moral leadership, democratic and human. Killing children for demanding better governance is moral failure that stains any leader's legacy permanently. Creating problems instead of solving them through competent policymaking is leadership failure that disqualifies someone from high office. Using military force against civilians exercising constitutional rights is democratic failure that violates the social contract between government and governed. Showing no empathy for grieving families while celebrating business opportunities is human failure that reveals character completely lacking in basic decency. When Ruto asks where he should go, history provides clear answers. Other African dictators who refused to listen to their people eventually faced judgment. Some fled to exile in disgrace. Others faced international courts for crimes against humanity. Some were removed by their own people through popular uprisings. Ruto still has a choice. He could reform now and salvage some dignity, or face historical judgment that could be far harsher than voluntary resignation. This isn't just about Kenya, it's about a generation of young Africans who won't be intimidated by bullets or bought with empty promises. They see through the lies of leaders who serve foreign masters instead of their own people. They understand that true change comes when leaders actually serve people's interests, not international creditors who profit from African suffering. The story Dylan Page risked his safety to tell reaches far beyond Kenya's borders. 20 people died in police custody in just 4 months before Albert Ojwang was killed. 60 protesters died in 2024. 16 more died in June 2025. These aren't just statistics to cite in political arguments. These are real people with families, dreams, and futures that were stolen by state violence authorized from the highest levels of government. Kenya spends more on debt payments to foreign creditors than on the health services, education systems, and infrastructure projects that could actually improve people's lives. This debt trap isn't accidental or unavoidable. It's deliberately designed to keep African countries dependent on Western financial institutions that profit from perpetual African poverty and political instability. Ruto's speech at the MSME event revealed everything wrong with his leadership approach. Instead of acknowledging the pain his policies have caused ordinary Kenyans, he demanded praise for failed economic programs. Instead of taking responsibility for deaths that occurred under his direct command, he blamed victims for their own suffering. Instead of offering concrete solutions to problems his administration created, he demanded that protesters solve them for him. Young Kenyans protesting in the streets represent the future of Africa. They won't accept leaders who kill their own people for demanding accountability. They won't accept economic policies designed to benefit foreign creditors more than African citizens. They won't accept the tribal divisions that older politicians cynically use to maintain power while failing to deliver basic services. When Ruto finally leaves office, whether through elections, impeachment, popular uprising, or other means, he'll be remembered primarily for the blood on his hands. Albert Ojwang, Boniface Kariuki, and dozens of others died because he consistently chose violence over dialogue, foreign approval over national sovereignty, and personal power over genuine public service. The international community is watching this situation develop. Independent journalists are documenting government crimes in real time. Young Africans are organizing across traditional boundaries. The truth is spreading faster than government propaganda can contain it. This is why every voice raised against injustice contributes to eventual accountability. This is why the truth will eventually prevail, no matter how many people authoritarian governments try to silence along the way. So did I miss anything? Is there anything that you out there would like to add to this conversation? If there is, please put it in the comments section. But if you're watching and you have nothing to say, would it be too much for me to ask you to write the words, "Let's hold leaders accountable"? When you put that in the comments, it lets me know that you watched the video to the end, you like the channel, you like what I'm doing, and you want me to continue. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Thank you.